5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA online at the big1050.com and the MGoBlog Roundtable. I mean, look, if we're going to be the Big 1050 in week one, we got to do it bigger, right? We got to welcome more people into the Victor's Lounge. We got to have big guests in studio. We got to have a bigger MGoBlog Roundtable. Check, and now check with the bigger roundtable this morning. So it's not just Brian Cook, by the way. Good morning, Brian Cook. How are you?
Good morning, Brian Cook. How are you?
Good morning, Seth Fisher in studio. How are you?
Good morning, Brian Cook. How are you?
Good morning, Craig Ross. How are you?
Still living, theoretically.
And looky here. My long-lost brothers. My long-lost pals.
Are you the third twin?
I'm the third twin. They just didn't know it. They just didn't know it.
We'll
The
take it.
Sklar brothers are with us on the MGoBlog Roundtable as well. How are you guys? Randy and Jason, how are you this morning?
We're great. First of all, I love the MGoBlog Roundtable. We listen to it all the time. So I feel like we've been a part of it for years, and now here we are. So it is wonderful to be here with our friends. We do stuff with the MGoBlog. We give our hot takes on the MGoBlog podcast. So it is wonderful to be here.
So we got so much ground to cover, so many things to talk about and look ahead to. But first of all, I mean, since you guys are on the roundtable, let the folks know where they can see you.
Jay, go ahead.
Well, first of all, we're so excited for the season. We can't wait. But we will be in Ann Arbor for Michigan Alumni Family Weekend, which is the Minnesota game. One night, September 27th, the Friday night before the game, we got your plans for you. You're going to be in Ann Arbor, 8 p.m. We're doing a show at the Michigan Theater. Huge show, big theater. Hopefully at that point, we're going to be 3-0 going into that game, right? 3 or 4-0. 3-0. Season heating up. First Big Ten game. Celebrate the night before with us. Seth and Brian will be there. I hope everyone will be. I hope Ira will be there. Craig will be there.
I'll be there for sure.
Past his bedtime, he'll be there. We want you guys there.
Bring my warm milk. I'll be there.
All right. So
guys, just to it's the second Big Ten game.
Second
You
Big
said
Ten.
the first Big Ten game, yeah. You said the second Big Ten game.
all right. So you look, I want to be able to talk about Fresno State. So here's how I'm gonna do this week. Since there are so many topics and I don't want to touch on every single one of them with every single guy, I'll just go one by one and say, hey, what from this week jumped out at you? What kind of tickled your fancy? What do you want to react to from this past week as we're now in game week? So BC, Brian Cook, look back here over the course of the week. What jumped out to you from this week as it relates to Michigan football?
Well, I mean, you gotta tell me, like, what is going on with the offensive line? Like, is Evan Link starting? Is Giudice starting? What is going on?
Yes.
How can you?
Yes and yes.
What? Are you serious?
That's what I see. If you're asking me, what do I believe is going to be? Do I believe those two guys are going to start on Michigan's offensive line? I believe those two guys are going to start on Michigan's offensive line.
Wow.
I mean, so like, what? Like,
right?
is Greg Crippen just sitting in a room that's dark and listening to Tori Amos right now? Like, what is going on?
So first with Evan Link, we go back to the first week of camp, and I was hearing buzz about Evan Link kind of rising up at that point. That he was, this guy, he's up to 328 pounds. He's really not. He could always move, but he couldn't move people. Like he could move, he could pass block, but he couldn't just move people off the ball. Now he's showing he can move people off the ball. When I came back from vacation, it's like, man, he has really stood up, and he is really looking like the best guy. When it comes to going against the first string line, like this dude is holding up the best, is what I was hearing. So I think he's going to start. Now, the Giudice
Giudice.
story.
Giudice.
Giudice. I got to get the man's name right. I'm sorry.
I've tried to listen to it 4 times, and I think I keep on screwing up. I'm pretty sure it's Giudice.
This one is more intriguing to me because I think that you got 3 guys who could legitimately play, and it's not about other guy him just in the Evan Link case. I think it was I just don't know that they had. I just think Evan Link has risen. I'm trying.
Okay.
But in the
we've been through this before.
But at the center spot, I think Greg Crippen is really good. I think that Raheem Anderson is really good. But Dom Giudice, the physicality is there. The mentality is there. And then they say, man, his football IQ, the Olu piece of it, to be able to call out everything on the line. He has that piece of it too. And I think it's gonna be him. I think it's gonna be him. So if he wins it, put it this way. If he wins it, it's not because those guys faltered. That's what you need to take away from it. It's not because it wouldn't be because Greg Crippen fell down on the job or Raheem Anderson fell down on the job. It would be because Dom Giudice was that good.
So Sam, if Evan Link is the starter at right tackle, because I felt last year right tackle was okay, but not great, particularly in pass pro. And if Evan Link has actually won that job, could this offensive line be as good as last year's offensive line? Because Brian brings up the exact point I think that's probably first in all of our heads, which is what's going on here. Evan Link, Dom Giudice, just a surprise. And for me, and I've said it the last 2 years coming away out of the spring game, I really like Raheem Anderson. I mean, that's a physical guy who plays tough. And, I liked him in this spring game a lot. And I liked him prior year a lot.
Yeah. So
I mean, could he move out to guard?
So here's my thing. I felt like in the Evan Link case, I really feel like it's going to be Evan Link at right tackle. Dom, because the competition is so strong, I was like, hey, man, I could really, because we talked about this on Monday on our post press conference video. I felt like Monday is Dom, but depending on how practice goes, I could really see any of those guys, or really Greg Crippen. I could really see it being great, depending on how practice goes this week, because any of those guys could really play. So I'm still gonna say Dom.
Wow.
But if it wound up being Greg Crippen, I wouldn't be surprised. But you don't feel like, this is what you need to take away. Don't feel like if it's Dom Giudice that it's just this sign that something's wrong with Crippen or something's wrong with Raheem Anderson. You shouldn't feel like that.
No, but I feel like Crippen's going to go kill somebody.
Here is the most interesting thing about the Dom Giudice story. When they took Dom Giudice, there was the staff was, I can tell the story now. The staff was like, WTF.
Yeah.
What are we doing? Jim Harbaugh. That was a Jim Harbaugh take.
Well, I remember that recruitment. It was like during the middle of COVID, and he watched a workout film on Twitter or something, and he was
nobody remembers that recruitment because it didn't exist. It was just like, oh, he's in the class now.
Talking about. No, I had to write that thing up. I'm like, this is literally the only piece of information.
Yeah, Jim got tipped off by, I think it was John or someone from the Ravens, tipped him off, and he took him, and the rest of the staff didn't know about it.
Yeah.
He took him, and the rest of the staff didn't know about it. So they took this defensive lineman, like, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? Right?
Okay.
So they get him, and he comes in, and the guy's a worker. He's a mauler. He's a player. Now, he winds up flipping to the offensive line and working his way up over there. And I mean, everything that you wanted, that Sharon Moore looks at as an offensive lineman, this guy is he is physical as all get out. He is super smart. He is an absolute mauler, and he brings a lot of what they've seen in past centers to the table. That's not to say that Greg Crippen doesn't or Raheem Anderson doesn't, but I think this is maybe the most intense competition on the whole team.
Two things. One, this is giving me great hope for Zach Ludwig. Kid's going to be a monster. Right? Give props where props are due. Two, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this whole run started with Andrew Vistardis, who was not a highly celebrated recruit, was he?
He was a walk-on.
He's a walk-on.
Right.
Yeah.
So walk-on. I mean, I think I was rated higher than Dom Giudice. He was like in the 1700s, and I didn't even have a recruiting profile.
I looked this up. He was rated lower than Brady Palante.
There you go.
So I think he might be the lowest rated recruit of all time that Michigan has taken as a scholarship player.
Ronnie Bell was in the 2000s.
Was he? Oh.
Well,
I have a database that goes
Yeah.
back to 1990, so
That's
I'm going
another
to pull
Jim
this
thing,
one up.
Yeah, so
ultimately, his trajectory can't be worse than Patrick Kugler if we look at the news.
but it is. But okay, Jay, you didn't need to go there. But
Is that where you want to set the bar, guys?
Yeah, Jay.
No.
You can't.
My guys, I love them. I love them.
Throwing flames.
See, I love you. I don't know how much it works on AM radio, but I love it.
And you can see the Sklar brothers Friday, September 22nd at the Michigan Theater.
Thank you, Ira, on the other side.
Patrick Miller jokes in the set. Is that a thing now?
We're sharpening the knives. No, I think we got 3 minutes on Kugler alone.
Yeah, I hear you. No, so I tell you what? They talk a lot like this line. They say this line reminds them of 2021.
Yeah.
Now whether that works out that way on the field remains to be seen. But if it works out that way, wow.
Well, the dirty secret of last year's line is the tight ends, and Bredesen were like the best blockers they had. Like I think in our grading at least, like Michigan was getting a lot more running off the tight ends. Now that's a different kind of battle, right? You're fighting edges and you're fighting linebackers sometimes, and a lot of times defensive ends, not defensive tackles. So it could just been a competition thing too. But up until the championship, I don't think a lineman was doing better than one of the tight ends. I think Keegan, Brian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Keegan was past everybody else in the championship game, and that was the first time all season.
Well, I mean, just in my grading, it's difficult sometimes because I don't score various blocks that I don't think I can accurately judge. So, like, Drake Nugent didn't get graded basically all season, and then he had a bunch of points, pro and con, in the championship game. But yeah, I mean, the one thing about this line is that I think it should be maybe an improvement as pass blocking line, because if you go and you look at the Pro Football Focus scores for Barnhart and Henderson last year, their pass blocking was not good. And Barnhart improved when he moved inside, but if Michigan can get Link to click here, I think they'll improve in that department. Now, how relevant is that going to be if it's Alex Orji? I don't know.
Well, that's the issue, isn't it, Brian? I mean, as Pro Football Focus points out, you can get away with some mistakes in pass pro and still have an okay pass game. You can't get away with mistakes in the run game and have an okay run game. One block, you're out. And so that's sort of the interesting part to me. If they start Alex Orji, well, this really isn't going to be, I guess, a passing offense, or one that really puts a lot in the passing offense, yet your offensive line may be the place most suited for that. And so that's the interesting part to me starting in week one. If this offensive line can run block, okay. If not, then you say, okay, you've got a quarterback who can really run the ball. We don't know if he can hand it off, because I don't think he handed it off once last year. then you've got a question. Do they have mismatched pieces? And that's the issue to me.
They've been playing on TV like the old Penn State game from last year, and on Fox, the Ohio State game. And I watched those games and the national championship game in this past week, and I rewatched all those games. And on the touchdown after Mikey makes the makes the interception, and we go down to the goal line, who is pulling right at the goal line to Gio Hadi? He's there on like that play that then puts, and he makes a key block that puts Corum in the end zone. And in the Penn State game, we ran it 37 times in a row. Miles Hinton is on the field. That's not pass pro. Those are running plays all the time. And so a better Miles Hinton, to Brian's point, a better Miles and improved Miles Hinton this year, I think that tackle spot improves a lot from last year. I think this line could be as good as last year or approaching it.
Wow.
They certainly are thinking along those lines. Again, we got to see them against some other teams. The quarterback situation. I think Davis Warren. I think the talk about how he's pushed Alex. I think that talk is legit. I don't get the sense that Alex really faltered. He has been consistent throughout in making the throws that he's got to make. This is I've made this, for me, be an assessment of, can he make 3rd and 4 to 6? Can he make that throw consistently? That's been my question all along, and he's been doing that. I wanted to know, how does he respond to a bad practice? Because before I left, he was having all these really, really good practices, and I got back, he had a practice where he threw 3 interceptions, and they said he threw 4 interceptions all at camp. So this was a really bad practice, clearly. And he finished that practice strong, came back the next day and had a really good practice. They're like, hey, he's showing you all the signs of being a guy that they can count on, with a guy really pushing him hard. So I think he's going to be the guy, but I think they're going to give Davis Warren some snaps, like not garbage time snaps. I think Davis Warren is going to play when the game is still in question, to get him grizzled too, to get him grizzled as a backup, and to get him grizzled so in case you got to break the glass.
So are we finally going to see the backup quarterback run less than the starting quarterback? Or is it still going to be like Davis Warren comes in and all of a sudden we run the ball with the quarterback now?
Well, I mean,
because can't get Orgy hurt against.
Yeah, I mean, he can run some. He can run some, but he'll run less. I mean, obviously.
The question is, because Orgy's legs are going to be part of the offense, so everyone knows that's just if you're using Orgy, that's part of the idea, that's the plan. But what teams are going to do against him is they're going to stack the box. Exactly what Michigan used to do to Urban Meyer, right? Bring an eighth guy down, and now you have a safety to deal with the quarterback. So the question is, can he beat man coverage? Can he make those kinds of throws that you beat a Don Brown defense with? Because I think that's what Texas is going to do to us. And I don't know if they have the tackles this year like they did last year to do it, to get away with it. But they're going to try, because they're going to man up on our receivers outside, and someone's going to have to get open for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question for Brian, and perhaps Seth in particular, and that's, there's some noise that if Orgy really is the primary guy, which most people seem to think, do they have to change the offensive structure at all to accommodate Orgy, or can they run the same offensive schemes they have last year?
They're not changing the offensive structure. That's it's just a non-starter.
But they have things in the offense that they can call that are more Alex Orgy plays.
Correct.
Versus
the plays, right.
Davis Warren plays. But so we saw last year, when he was in, they would run bash, they would run, QB power. That stuff's going to be part of the Orgy game plan. The thing that I do think you would see less of is you would see less of him under center, because when you put him under center, it's like Denard under center. You're taking away a large part of the asset that is Alex Orgy if he's not really a threat to run the ball. Now, you can get a lot of the stuff that you get from playing under center by just operating out of the pistol. So, like, I don't think that necessarily changes what you're doing. It's just you want to keep that threat on every play.
Yeah, you might recall, you remember last year, Michigan couldn't really run the ball early in the season, and then they put JJ in a shotgun, and they start putting reads on some of their base run plays like duos, and it opened up the run game. And so I think it lends itself, especially with Alex Orji, to what Brian is talking about. You're not putting him under center. Go ahead.
And also wasn't there, those reads were in there, they just kind of turned it off a lot for JJ, where they're like, you're not going to keep it for this game. We're not going to let you do it here and there. But I think back to that, JJ running on a purely designed run at Penn State where it was like 3rd and 12 or something, and he went and got the first down. So I think that run will just be turned on all the time for Orji if he sees it, if he sees someone crashing down, and he's just going to take it more often than not, I think.
Well, the other thing that might change the offense significantly from last year is Samaj Morgan.
Yes.
So, Josh Giudice comes in here and it's like speed and space. We're going to do all kinds of screens and stuff. And Michigan was the most screen-averse team in the country. And as soon as they get Samaj Morgan, they're like, well, maybe this guy can run some screens. And for a guy like Orji, who's going to want some easy throws to get into a rhythm, I think that you're going to see more of that this year. More just like flinging it out to Morgan and seeing what happens, especially because you can flank Colson Loveland outside of him now. And Loveland is not a great inline blocker, but last year when he got matched up with a guy in the back 7, that was a really good matchup for Michigan.
Well, sorry, I thought you were done.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say you aren't going to see him under center a ton, but I think you are going to see him under center some, but just not a ton, because they are going to, whoever the quarterback is, they're going to play action them. So that goes without saying that you're gonna see him under center. But do I think they are going to you would, because it's Alex Orji, you would probably see him in the gun more than you would see the other quarterbacks in the gun. To Brian's point, I think that would probably be the case.
I mean, the absolute best usage of him is exactly what we did with Devin Gardner all the time, with that inverted veer, because you're going to have Donovan Edwards running that bash, running that outside. So like you got Edwards' speed going sideways, and then you have to read that, and then he can just decide to keep it and just go straight downfield. He's not a Denard, right? He's a bruiser, but you get him moving downfield. And when you have a quarterback running game, you have just one fewer guys in the defense to deal with it. And Texas is one team, maybe Ohio State's another team that might be able to just man up and put an extra guy in the box, but the rest of the teams we face, even up to Oregon, I mean, they have talent in a lot of different places, but I don't know if they have the talent to just match up that way against Michigan, because Michigan's got speed at the receiver spot. That's the one thing that they do have at receiver is speed. So I think that if you want to imagine how we're going to play, it's just it's a lot like kind of Urban Meyer, Ohio State.
I think Sam as well. I don't know if you guys watched the Florida State Georgia Tech game, but I think Michigan would be smart to watch how Georgia Tech took apart a very talented defensive line, and with all the transfers and all the money they threw at all these guys, they with the quarterback ran it at him, and they had a running back who looked huge. And I remember the announcer said he's 6'2", 230. He looked huge, and he was just running through people. I thought to myself, Alex Orji is 6'3", 240. So, just in a context, this guy was rolling over people.
Yeah.
You will have that where he can fall forward, hopefully, Hassan Haskins style. And we're not even talking about Seth and Brian, your favorite player on this team, Khalil Mullings, which I think he's going to have one heck of a year. He, as a short yardage guy, scoring touchdowns near the goal line and coming out of the backfield and catching passes too. This dude is going to be incredible. He's going to make an NFL team with his year this year. And I mean, they just have a lot of different options other than last year. It's a different way to play. And I definitely don't think those Pac-12 teams are ready for this type of physicality. They just aren't.
Well, Brian alluded to something earlier. putting Colson Loveland outside as a receiver. Because when you shift him out there now, because if you've gone with your regular personnel, they're going to match with their regular personnel. Now all of a sudden they've got a cornerback, and if he runs a deep route, you got a cornerback and a free safety used up against a tight end, and that means somebody is going to have a mismatch, right? It could be Kala Mullings, it could be Donovan Edwards against a linebacker, it could be Alex Orji against a linebacker. So one of these guys, when you move, and that's what Michigan has in this offense. They have a lot of parts that can do a lot of different things on any given play, or by switching a guy's side. So you move him over, and then you have Max Bredesen shift from the right to left. Now you have a completely different look, and now you have Bredesen matched up against somebody like a nickel or something. So there's a lot of ways that, and the Rose Bowl game plan used a lot of this. There's a lot of ways that they can use the parts they have in ways that you wouldn't expect. Donovan Edwards out wide, Colson Loveland out wide, Kalel Mullings as your running back. What personnel do you use against that?
Yeah. I mean, Sam, I do think it's interesting to go back to your initial question, which was, what are we looking for in this game, that we've spent like the first 20 minutes of that only talking about the offense. And when I think about this team, I think the identity of this team is going to be the defense. So you look at a game like the Florida State game and you say, how does the Georgia Tech team upset a Florida State? I think they did it with their offense against Florida State's defense. I think Florida State's defense didn't keep up their end of the bargain. So when you look at this game this weekend and you say, well, Fresno State's, they're a legit team, 9-4 last year. They're giant killers. They go into other people's buildings. That's what they do. You got to say to yourself, the identity and the strength of this team is its defense. So is Fresno State going to walk in and score more than 10 points? Are they going to score 17 points? This, for me, is the coming out party for this defense to say, hey, we've had some good defenses in the last few years. This is the defense. And I think when we see that this weekend, or if we see some version of that, a shutout or a 7-point game, 10-point game, 13-point game, I think we're going to get really excited about what's coming the following week.
And see, what I don't know about this defense is I just don't know about its depth. I gotta see that in games to know that they have it. Their 11 is as good as any 11 in the country. I will even give them this, because the guys are adamant. We could be even better than last year. And I think with the 11, and maybe they can make the case for that. They'll drop off at Sam, but they can maybe improve at the linebacker spot with Jay Sean. So, but past that, when you look at the next 11, I don't know.
The next 11, and maybe they're not as deep, but they do have some guys who I think who are going to be reserve pieces who are going to be good. Like, start with TJ Guy. And if they can get Jimmy Rolder healthy, if they get Benny back to being what he's been before, they're not going to rotate 9 guys on the defensive line. But this year, Josh Wallace is a backup. His name's Amir Hall this time.
Mm-hmm.
And, they brought in Wesley Walker from Tennessee, a guy who's played a ton at safety. Like, I think, if they start Zeke Berry, I think Jade McBurrows is a very capable backup at nickel. Like, they have a reasonable amount of depth, and I think it's just our perspective coming from the deepest defense any of us will ever see. It's only in that context that this feels like a defense that's a little shallow.
Right.
I mean, and Brian, you guys and you all discussed this about Mason Graham being a guy who played both ways at Servite out here in Los Angeles, playing both ways, finishing up a game, standing in the parking lot and being like, let's go. Let's go. Let's play more. So can this guy play 65 snaps instead of the 35 snaps he played? Of course he can. He's Mason Graham. He jumps like a flying squirrel at a quarterback. He's like launched out of a cannon set.
This is what came out to me when I was doing the defensive tackle preview. I was like, okay, let's comp him to other incredible sophomores, first rounders, first overall. I wanted to see what he looked like. His numbers are better. His numbers last year were at the same level as those guys their NFL years. So I could not find a sophomore who performed as well as him. If there's more to go, then it's there is no roof.
Yeah.
And that dude, like, and the question is, can he play longer, right? Can he play more snaps? Well, look at the back half of the year, because they had him playing more snaps. Now, that's a question for Grant, and I think that's a really important question for Grant, because you're not going to want to have him on the field more than, say, 55% of snaps, because he's going to get tired. And you saw him get tired at the end of the Ohio State game, and then they had that big, long – they had a drive where they could run. He got locked on the field with good. Mason Graham does not get tired. Like, he played, I think, 45 snaps, 50. He was playing like up to 70% of snaps, which is more than Mozzie Smith ever played. Like, the only guys you can compare that to is Mike Martin and Ryan Van Bergen, and they did it like once.
Yeah. All right, we need to get to a break. As we do, we're gonna welcome a guest inside of the Bud Light Victor's Lounge. You just got to be caller number 7 at 734-998-1050. That's where the Wolverine rental countdown to kickoff goes down on the corner of Main and Snyder. Just be the caller number 7, 734-998-1050. We got to get to a quick break here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA, online at thebig1050.com.
Hey, Seth, I think you forgot about Alvin Wistert. Did you check out his tape?
It's hard to tell. He's also a really good offensive lineman, which is if Mason Graham could probably do. I put Graham against the Wisterts.
Okay.
They're all smokers when they were here. Here's a list of guys who are ranked below Dom Giudice. Ready? Brandon Engelman, who was a 5.3 to Rivals.
Yeah, I remember him. Yeah.
2-star. Yeah,
He's my dentist.
Cornelius Jones.
Cornelius Jones. He was ranked so low they took the R out of his name.
That's right.
R for really low.
Merrill Evans.
Who?
Yeah.
Pharrell Evans, yeah.
Pharrell Evans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He was a 5.
He's a fullback, right? Yeah, he's a fullback.
He was a 66 on ESPN. I've never seen anything that low.
Fullbacks don't count. You can't fullbacks are like specialists.
Fullback. He was a linebacker.
Was he?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about someone else who was a fullback, I guess.
I think you're thinking of Andre Criswell. He's on the list as well.
Okay.
Andre Criswell, yeah.
Paul Sorrentos. It was
he a linebacker from Tennessee? Is that
right? No, he's from Kalamazoo. He's from Portage, Michigan. I knew his older brother dated a friend of mine for a while. Joey dated a good friend of mine. Ray Vinapal.
Wow.
And then
Ray Vinapal actually finished out a decent career at Pitt. If I recall that.
He was a 63 to ESPN. Yeah. That is really low. He was the number 103 safety to Scout and a 5.4 to Rivals. Philip Brackens.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he was from Tennessee, right?
Yeah, and Tim Bracken, he was the other Brackenses. And then the lowest of all time, ready? Emmanuel Cassius.
He is from Canada.
Yeah. That was another one of those recruitments where, like, I think he wasn't on the list of the initial guys that they got, or he was the first time anyone ever heard his name was the day like they announced who the class was.
Him and Elaine Kashima were supposed to be these athletic freaks.
I remember Elaine Kashima, but don't you? I mean, the Dom Giudice thing is interesting in that it's a true meritocracy. It's a true meritocracy. If you are doing the things that are impressed, this is where we have to trust the coach like Sharon Moore. I mean, if Sharon Moore was a linebackers coach and this was happening, I'd feel worse about it. Mm-hmm. He's an offensive line guy who had the Joe Moore Award. Not to get back to the Stallions thing, okay, but I'm just going to say, I love how the documentary, or at least who is the Free Press writer? This guy definitely went to Michigan State. He
did. Tony Paul. He's a Michigan State grad.
Okay, thank you. I didn't even know that, but I knew it.
You're on the money.
He's such a jerk as far as that goes. But it's like, really, we had the Joe Moore Award-winning offensive line 2 years in a row and were a semifinalist the third year. We had the best quarterback, highest rated or drafted quarterback in our history during that period of time. We had Blake Corum, who scored the most TDs out of any. None of this has to do with sign stealing. These are just generational players. The defense was great. and in a way where you had defensive players who put so many people in the league. Are you saying that the NFL was duped by our sign stealing and they drafted guys? Like,
Well,
what
Randy,
are you saying?
the thing about that
Woman
documentary,
is
it's so
woman.
amusing to me, is like, I don't know if you remember the old Saturday Night Live skit where they'd have a lineup with a nun, a refrigerator, and a black guy, right?
Yeah.
Derek Morris. Like that was the lineup. And that's what they had here. They had a guy in a bodysuit with his voice altered, a Michigan State grad who's got a beef about Michigan, and then Ryan Day's best friend. That, that's and so to me, the thing is worth it just for the hilarity of how the whole thing is structured. I loved it. So
I mean,
anyway.
Seth, you always said it. People who were screaming about it exposed themselves for who they were. And that's what I felt like.
Yeah,
I saw.
anyone who got mad about sign stealing was just telling you they don't know ball.
Yeah, and the NCAA looks terrible because, like, why didn't you go after? Who's the guy? Was Oklahoma the guy who?
Back in about 10 seconds, guys.
I don't know. The NCAA is not going to fall any lower in people's eyes, I don't think.
Yeah, fair enough.
Mm-mm.
All right, stand by. I'll count you back in. Back on radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA, online at the Big1050.com. Sam Webb, Mr. Ira Weintraub, and the MGoBlog Roundtable crew +2. That is right. We got Brian Cook. We got Seth Fisher. We got Craig Ross. And we have Randy and Jason Sklar with us. And folks, listen.
We should have the Sklars every week.
No.
They should get up at 2 a.m. every week.
No.
No, I want to just sit back.
I want you guys here.
It's impractical.
Wait, I will tell you this. This feels very much like when Randy and I did 2 episodes of Better Call Saul, a show that we loved.
I love it too.
We were very grateful. I know you love it as a lawyer. We were grateful to be on the show, but there was a moment when we booked the show where we said, "Oh no, are we going to ruin one of our favorite shows by being the show?" So we don't want to ruin this one of our favorite.
Well,
all right, wow.
So what did you feel? I mean, what's the answer to that, Jason? Well, I mean, what's Jay? What's when you did the show, did you ruin it for yourself?
No,
No,
they did not. They did a great job.
I'll answer it.
No.
The guy who wrote it, I'll answer for my brother because whatever, it's the same thing. But the point is that the guy who directed it, who was one of the show running writers, Tom Schnoz was his name, was such a good director. We were in a music store in Albuquerque, like they owned, that was who we were. And he said to us and Bob Odenkirk, he said, just run through the lines, just rehearse it, and just run it a couple times. And so we're just standing in the middle of this music store and gave the most natural rehearsal performance, low key and everything. And he said, "Okay, I got it." He had put a camera way up in the like in the top, like shooting through guitars that were hanging down. And he got this crazy wide master shot. We didn't even know we were being filmed, which is really the way you should play every scene. But he was such a brilliant director. He put us at ease and put us into these characters. And so this is what I'll say to bring it back to Michigan football and bring it back to Dom Giudice and bring it back to Evan Link and bring it back to all that stuff. There's a moment where you got to trust the guy who's making all the calls. We had to trust this guy on set. We got to trust Sharon more, that he knows what he's talking about with the offensive line. He knows more than we do. And we're going to sit here on Saturday afternoon or Saturday evening and just say to ourselves, good call, Sharon. Good call. You know what you're doing.
So I wanted to get into some of the guys on this defense that are a chance to be stars. Seth and I talked about Jayshawn Barham before the roundtable started, and someone in the chat, said, "Hey, Sam, did you hear about?" Marcus Ellis said, "Sam, did you hear what Grant Newsome said about Barham?" And I did, and he said he's the most talented second level guy I've seen here since Devin Bush, and he's bigger than Devin Bush. And that is exact. Talking
Radio
to
listeners, Brian's making a face.
Talking to guys inside is like, this dude, he gets home like Devin Bush. Like when he blitzes, practice observer. But and so what that said to me is like you send guys on blitzes, but it's a skill. There's a skill to it. Every guy who goes on a blitz doesn't always get home. You know, some guys are strong, some guys are quick, some guys have moves, but you don't always find guys who have all of that. Devin had all of that. And they say Jay-Sean has all that, but he's like 6'3", 250.
Well, yeah, but so you got to remember that this is the one fan base in America that doesn't want to blitz. So, like, I don't care. Like
that's a really interesting thing because everyone says, "Oh, Don Brown, oh, blitzing, oh no." Basically, you're right.
You know, listen. You guys are forgetting. I go back and watch the last defensive play of the national championship. It's Derek Moore dropping into coverage. He's dropping into a whole coverage. Gets out on a curl to a wide receiver all the way out at the hash mark and breaks it up. Like they've got guys. They can rush 4 and include Barham as one of the 4 and drop somebody else. They've got a lot of guys who can drop.
I mean, when I was going over your UFRs from last year, Seth, most of the minuses from the defensive ends were dropping into coverage, which is good. But if that's the only thing you're getting minuses for, you're really ripping it up.
And it's good that Derek Moore, that you cite that, because that was for Derek Moore and Josiah Stewart. That was a weak point for them compared to Braden McGregor and
Harold.
And Jalen. They were really good at it, but they were older. They had done it for a while longer. That is going to be, I expect that to be a strength for those guys and would add to the versatility of the defense this year.
Harrell was actually good at it. McGregor just had ridiculously long arms. So you could just stand anywhere on the field and just like the ball could not get around him. But I mean, Derek Moore came along a lot. So like you watch him in the Minnesota game and they were picking at him. Last year when I was doing the defense, every week there'd just be something that worked against Michigan, right? And then like the next week they cleaned up and then slants were the problem. Then underneath were the problem. There was always just one thing for
they
one
were bad
drive.
against Nebraska in that game, in that area too.
Yeah. And a lot of times it was just because they were running these cover 3s when they were practicing. They were practicing for Ohio State. You could see them practicing, and it didn't matter against some of those teams. But you could see Derek Moore really come a long way. Josiah Stewart to a different degree, but Moore really went from being really bad at it to being pretty good at it, and it showed off his athleticism is what can.
So here's the question for you guys, and I'll pose it to you like I did Seth. Do you think Jay-Sean Barham can be a game wrecker? Can he be like a dude who game in and game out? Teams like, man, we gotta account for that guy.
Yes, because think of that, the defensive line. It goes back to the defensive line. They're going to be eating up so many double. How many people are going to be blocking Jay-Sean Barham? This dude is going to roam free, and if he's fast, he is just going to be hitting anything that comes through. He's going to be amazing. And we forget about what a great tackler Ernest Hausman was. He had like 45 tackles last year, and he was the 3rd linebacker. This dude's a great tackler too. Again, I think these linebackers are going to be clean coming through and just hitting people.
Randy, I want you on every week because you're the only person who agrees with me on this. and Brian will call me a dope and roll his eyes. I need Randy on here saying, yeah, what he says.
Well, also, I thank you, Craig. I'll take that compliment transitive property through my brother. But I think that if we get a strong push up the middle on our defense, a lot of times, what does that mean? That means the quarterback's going to be flushed out of the pocket. So even if Barham's not blitzing, but he's spying the quarterback, as soon as you see him get flushed out of the pocket, he's going to be like a missile going after him. And I think you will get tackles for loss, I think you'll see him making plays on the outside. Because if Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant are who we think they are going to be, then I think the pocket's going to collapse a lot, and you're going to see quarterbacks, especially running quarterbacks, out on the edges. And that's when they're vulnerable, and hopefully that's when.
Yeah, hopefully he stops a guy like Will Howard. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Randy, you're going to have the final word there. Just tell the folks real quick about your show coming up for Minnesota Week.
Minnesota Week on September 27th. That's Friday night, 8 p.m. at the Michigan Theater. That is a big theater. Want to see all of our big 1050 guys out there. And everybody listens to this the new thing. I love the new branding, by the way. I absolutely love it. The big 1050 WTK. You guys are the best. It is our chance to give back a little something to this community that we love so much. Thank you for letting us be on. And thanks to MGoBlog. Brian and Seth, I cannot wait for the book. I don't mean to put more pressure on you, but like it is the masterpiece. And I highly recommend going back and listening to re-listening to the MGoBlog podcast about when you guys just talked about winning the national championship. It was beautiful. It was emotional. It's why we should never forget how beautiful that entire moment was. So thank you. We'll see you guys on the 27th, 8 p.m. Michigan Theater.
All right, that'll do it for us, folks. We'll see you tomorrow here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTK.